Good evening to you. You are watching Newsline Prime. This evening we are going to talk to senior journalist Malinda Senviratna, who is here with us in the studio. Good evening to you, Malinda. Thank you for being here. I want to get directly to the topic. We are after 1 month after the April 21st attacks. We've seen the three armed forces acting tirelessly over a full month to ensure security, and to a certain degree we can see that children are going to schools, but heavy military presence around these areas as well. Negligence is a key word that people, be it local or foreign, even the media that reported on this, are associating with these terrorist attacks that happened in the country. I want to take our start for this conversation from that area. Negligence has been an issue when it came to the bond scam in the country. Negligence has been an issue when it comes to certain appointments in the country. Negligence has now led to a new form of terrorism to rise in the country. What do you feel?
Well, negligence implies either lack of regulations or not abiding by them. The bond scam, as you mentioned. Appointments, I'm sure that they were not negligent, they knew what they were doing. But in this case, what we see, Rohan Gunaratna, who's like the foremost expert on these kinds of things, and lay people, I mean, in relation to this particular topic, from the cardinal to the various other politicians and political analysts, they have pointed out that the government has been, and it's of a criminal order. Now, how can you have training camps running in this country and no one knowing about it? How does that happen? I think former Army Commander General Dayarat Nayaka mentioned at a press conference that after the 18th of May 2009, there were some dozens of occasions when the LTT tried to reconstitute itself and engage in the same kind of activity, but we never heard about it, but they were all sorted out. So there was some mechanism in place to ensure national security at that point. The entire security system is now has been compromised. That's evident, but we are happy that thanks to this attack, that's probably the silver lining. The security forces have got their act together, or rather, the politicians are allowing them to do what they have to do. But the general belief is that the security forces, their hands were tied. They were not allowed to do their jobs. But I was just flipping over the Sun Tzu's Art of War, and one of the conditions for victory is for the politicians not to interfere, to let the people, the experts, do their thing. Of course, within the law, and you can't just arbitrarily kill people. But that element seems to have been fixed. We really don't know early days, but I think that schools have started, universities are starting today, and we are getting back to a normal way of normalcy has returned in that sense, and that's a good sign. But the main lesson is that we cannot and should not drop our guard, right? Just because a terrorist organization is dismantled or all the leaders captured, these things can pop out anytime, and the price we have to pay for democracy is absolute vigilance at all times, especially by those who are mandated to handle that kind of thing.
Malinda, let's now switch to the topic everyone is talking about these days. Especially, social media has picked up on a statement made by the Commissioner of the Elections, Chairperson of the Elections Commission, of the presidential election time frame between November and December. So, by the looks of it, we are looking at a possible election by the end of the year. We do not know how it will span out, when the candidates will be announced, when the nominations will be announced, so forth. But we are looking at the end of the year, a presidential election. But we are also at a stance where provincial council elections are not held. The emergency regulations are still in effect. A lot of things going on at the same time in our country. We are just reeling back from the April 21st attacks as well. What are your views? Is this a suitable time to go in for an election? Should an election be held? will an election be held?
Elections have been held during emergency, when emergency laws have been in place. Sometimes you can't help it. Postponement of elections is clearly not the answer, because representation is what is important. Now we had Dayasiri Jayasekara early April talking about the president going to the Supreme Court to find out whether he can remain in office for another year. I believe that he went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court earlier gave a kind of its opinion that you cannot. The 19th Amendment is pretty clear. The day before the amendment became law, the person holding that office ceases to hold that office by the 8th of January 2020. That is but the 19th Amendment has all kinds of flaws, but that's a different matter. When you talk about elections not being held, now we have not had the provincial council elections. They have been postponed. In the case of 3 provincial councils for more than well over a year now, almost 2 years. Other one almost 8 months. Rather 3 altogether. I don't know how many. But anyway, there seems to be absolutely no interest on the part of this government in holding elections. Now, even those who brought this government into power were vociferously attacking the previous regime, legitimately for its stance on democracy or lack thereof. Don't seem to be bothered about Are they serious about democracy in the first instance? Or is the government scared to have elections? I mean, that is the obvious conclusion that we have to arrive at this point regarding elections. And the presidential election, I don't think that, but we don't know, how the Supreme Court will determine. We should not presume. But for me, the law is pretty clear that Maithripala Sirisena ceases to be president by the 8th of January 2020. And the elections commissioner is supposed to have said, as you mentioned, that by between November and December, the election can be held and will be held.
Malinda, again, I want to ask this question from you as well, because there is discussion on this particular topic, the Counter-Terrorism Act. Now, before I come to the main topic, I want to ask you this as well. From time to time, when the UNP-led government is trying to bring in various legislation into the system, the main accusation or the allegation is that there is a hidden agenda or a hidden motive behind bringing in this. Now, the 19th Amendment is the best example. We saw people coming before the general public and saying the 19th Amendment is brought for this reason. However, what we saw was different. We saw the executive powers of the president being clipped, and we saw what it led to. 2 prime ministers at one time, no prime minister at one time, 2 IGPs in the country right now. So things like that. Then again, the Counter-Terrorism Act came into place, and then again the people started saying that the fundamental rights will be curtailed, democracy will be curtailed, so on and so forth. Again, a hidden agenda has been highlighted by maybe the opposition, maybe people with political agendas. But again, what is happening? The UNP brings in a legislation. People are accusing of them having a hidden agenda.
I don't think that is a phenomenon that is the preserve of the United National Party. All parties do that. And I don't think it's hidden either. Maybe they want to. They sugarcoat these things as this is important for the country and national security. We are doing it in the national interest. But we know the story of the Pied Piper. The same principle can be used for multiple ends. And we have seen in the case of the Counter-Terrorism Act, in the case of the 19th Amendment, it was clearly a partisan piece of legislation which was meant to further the political interests of the parties in power, that is the United National Party and the faction of the SLFP led by Maithripala Sirisena. And we saw what happened. And you should not legislate in that way. My rule of thumb is pretty simple. All you do is when someone proposes something, you see, okay, who's going to be the beneficiary? You put aside whether that immediate beneficiary is someone you like. But instead of which, you look, what if it came to the wrong hands, right? What if the wrong guy is in power and enforces this? This issue with the Counterterrorism Act, as various people have pointed out, it curtails basic freedoms and democratic practice will at the whims and fancies of those in power. That is not a very robust system of governance, or it does not do anything to to re-democratize this country. That's an issue. So whether it's a UNP thing, I'm not very clear on that. But well, the UNP is in power right now, and it's the UNP that is pushing for the Counterterrorism Act. Sajid Premdas, the deputy leader, has objected to it, and he's right, I think, at this point. But he's not the only one. A lot of other organizations have pointed out its flaws. We have the Prevention of Terrorism Act, and as you pointed out in a conversation earlier, you said that there's an issue about cybercrime and things like that, cyber attacks not being scripted into the prevention of terrorism. But then but there is other legislation. You just put it together, and what is this inordinate hurry and to bring something else? And that's how it is. You always cite the national interest. You cite some immediate concern, like the Easter Sunday attacks. We need new legislation. You already have it. Use it. If it is not adequate, amend it. You don't have to bring something totally new. And because when you bring something totally new, you throw in things. And we have to be careful, because the 19th Amendment, remember, the draft was the Supreme Court expressed serious concerns about the unconstitutionality of that of the 19th Amendment, and it didn't go back to the Supreme Court. It's a new draft, a new document that was put before the Parliament and was pushed through.
Malind, with that, we'll go in for a short commercial break. We'll be back. Now, Malinda, let's continue from that point. I want to drag your attention to this. We just spoke about the provincial council election and the presidential election. Now I want to ask you these no confidence motions that everyone is talking about these days. The JVP came forward with one, then there was one against Minister Rishad Badiuddin. Then again the logic was, where are the numbers for this particular no confidence motion if there is one? Now the practicality of it is what I'm questioning. If the no confidence motion is brought against the government, is there a practicality to it? Because there is practicality to it because the numbers are a bit not in order.
Right.
So what is your viewpoint?
Yeah, they are qualitatively different. The one against Rishad Badiuddin could win against an individual with a history, with fairly good corpus of evidence of some association with what happened on Easter Sunday. That is one thing, and other histories also will put there. But the one against the government, at that point, the government, everyone will close ranks, I believe, because it's nothing to do with, you can say it's about this or that, but they don't want to let down the party, and you don't have the numbers. So the accusation is that the JVP, which was silent for almost 3 weeks, more than 3 weeks about the Easter Sunday attack, and then all of a sudden, woke up when the incidents in Kuliyapiti and other places happened in northwestern province, and it's funny because there's a strange tendency from certain quarters at to obtain equivalency. Okay, you had all extremisms are bad. Yeah, so we know that. So are you saying that what happened in Kuliyapiti is equal to what happened on Easter Sunday? Where is the proportion, the sense of proportion in all these things? That person who was killed in Kuliyapiti should not have died. Not a single Muslim shop should have been attacked. We know that. But all of a sudden to say that, okay, this is the main enemy, and forget about the madrasas, you forget about the Tawheed Chamin, you forget about the ISIS, and you don't even want to say that they are terrorists. Or you say terrorism does not have a religion. As someone pointed out, well, there seems to be a lot of mosques where there are no religions, right? These people did it, they were affirming their faith. Someone can say they are not, that's not Islam, that's not in the Quran, the Prophet didn't say that. Same with the BBS, you can say, Buddha never said that or advocate this kind of thing. But that's an easy way out. We have to take, so when the Janata Vimukti Peramuna, after being quiet for 3 weeks, comes up with some proposal which has the obvious practical outcome of uniting the United National Party, they can say, well, that's not what we planned, but if that is the effect, then you question the logic of the action and their true loyalties and their true purpose in doing politics. Is it like just to, as an adjunct of the United National Party? Why were they so quiet? They have been kind of very dismissive of the person who was on the national list was associated with these attacks. We just wanted to have some ethnic balance. You don't you vet your people? I mean, you just don't pick from a hat or something like that. So Janata Vimukti Peramuna, I think, is showing its hand, and that's a good thing. I like it because I want everyone to be naked. I want everyone to remove all their masks and their disguises, and so that we can see them for who they are. The government has shown us.
Is that what is happening? Is the JVP being exposed for who they are because of their possible inability to carry out a no confidence motion, a move a no confidence motion?
Yeah, yes, I think that the JVP is exposing itself, not that it needs any more exposure. Pretty clear what they've been doing. I mean, for the longest possible time, they have been the main protector of this corrupt, incompetent government. And, I don't know how many votes they believe they can get.
But Malik, there has to be some logic into what is happening. There needs to be some form of thinking. If we, as people who are from the media, are able to look at this and identify and break it down and say, you have the viewpoint of this, the JVP being exposed, someone else might think, no, this is actually a good thing, the government needs to have no confidence against it. But that is obvious to the general public. So what do you think, in your opinion, is the thinking behind the JVP's action to bring in a no confidence?
Well, why is, from what I've heard, but I might be wrong, but what I've heard is their no confidence motion focuses on the government's inability to ensure the security of all people subsequent to the Easter Sunday attack. But why that? And not about the madrasas, not about the training camps, not about the sheer incompetence and criminal negligence, as you mentioned, of the government in terms of the rise of these extremist organizations in the name of Islam and Prophet and the Quran and all. We are not going to judge all Muslims. That is absolutely uncalled for and unfair. Right? We have to make that distinction. But why is the JVP leaving that aside and taking this? That is one aspect. Why is the JVP bringing a no confidence motion that is doomed to fail? Why is the JVP doing this now and not 3 weeks ago when they talk about it? When you put all that together, we have to come to certain conclusions. Of course, the government, it's very hard to say that anyone has any confidence in this government, and I think that exercise, that test, is best held in the form of an election. That is where the confidence or lack thereof of the government can be tested, and that is mandated by the Constitution and the election law.
Definitely.
And the 19th Amendment. Why is the government not holding elections? Right? So we can wait. I mean, of course, there's a national security issue. We can't postpone elections, of course, but in terms of the national security issue, in the aftermath of this tragedy, we need to support the government's efforts to bring the situation under control. I think that is an important thing, regardless of your political affiliations. And so this is not the time to, pull the rug from under the feet of those who are, for whatever reason or in whatever way, happen to be in power. The Minister of Defense, the President, the Prime Minister, the entirety of the national security apparatus, the citizens have to work with them and support them. That is a different issue.
I want to ask you this question as well, Malinda. Now, we remember when the bond scam took place. Why I'm dragging us back to that location is because there is an important message here. When the governor of the central bank at the time, Arjuna Mahendran, was being asked to leave, or the contract extension was not done by the president, we got to know that Prime Minister had travelled to the president's residence to talk to him about it and reminded to the president of the country that he is the minister in charge of the central bank, the Prime Minister. Then, before the president could travel to the central bank, we see the Prime Minister arriving at the central bank and organizing a sort of a ceremony there. But that sort of excitement or enthusiasm was not seen when the Prime Minister was not called for the National Security Council meeting. Now, the National Security Council meeting depends on the security of the nation, and that results in the security of the nation.
I think Prime Minister is a royalist, but more than that, he's a loyalist. He is very loyal to his friends. He's to a fault, and that comes probably before national love and loyalty to the country. If, as the Prime Minister is, according to the 19th Amendment, we were all told that it's the Prime Minister who calls the shots and not the President. If the Prime Minister of the country is denied access to, or is prevented from attending the Security Council meeting, all he has to do is to go out and say that I'm not allowed to do this. There is a threat to this country, and he was aware of it. His ministers were aware of it. Cabinet knew. A lot of people knew.
Harin's father knew.
And as some Muslim MPs, ministers are saying, they had made a lot of complaints had been made. It's unthinkable that Ranil Wickremesinghe did not know about what was happening. Why did he not, as the leader of a party, as a leader of the country, second in command, tell the general public there's a huge problem in this country? I'm not allowed to sit in the. Why can't? Is he too? I mean, was he being too polite? You can't let politeness and decorum and that kind of thing compromise, get in the way of running the country and securing the country from these kinds of attacks, these kinds of threats. So, if he could run to the presidential, the president's house or wherever, and plead with Maithripala Sirisena that, please do this. When it came to a friend who is a fraud, who had defrauded the country, who is a thief, why couldn't he do that when the entire country, the security of every single city, any one of us, remember Chaturanga, any one of us could have been in any of these places where they were attacked. Any one of us could have died. Harin didn't go. But none of the politicians went. We wonder why. Why is he so callous? Is he so uncaring? And why should we as citizens put our future and the futures of our children in the hands of this kind of man who does not care, does not give a damn about the country or the people?
Malinda, emotional words there, but election is coming up. That is where we started this conversation, and I'm connecting it back to that election is coming up and people will be made to choose.
Yes.
A lot of emotions going on amongst the people at this present time. A lot of loved ones lost. With all that is happening politically, how do you see things playing out for each of these political parties?
My view is that the person who campaigned most for Maithripala Sirisena to become president was Mahinda Rajapaksa. He created the conditions for you could have contested and won, looking back. I think the government, both factions, are returning the favor to the previous regime, led by the Rajapaksas, which is not necessarily a good thing. But we are an electorate that rarely elects people to power. We elect people, we throw them out of power. So we go for whoever is capable of defeating, best capable of defeating the incumbent.
That's very important. We don't vote to bring someone into power, but we vote someone else to put the guy who's holding power out.
I think the exception probably was Mahinda Rajapaksa in 2010. When you look at the numbers, overwhelming majority, Chandrika Bandaranayak Mahatunga also won by a considerable margin in 1994, but that was the situation where the United National Party lost its candidate to Wambatak, right? So that's a different situation. But if you're asking me to call depends on who is going to contest. It seems pretty obvious that Gotabaya Rajapaksa is going to contest on one side, and playing little games about his citizenship, just playing into his hands and turning him into a candidate. And now with all these attacks, where people are looking for someone who can and will make decisions that are absolutely necessary for the security of the nation and the people, it seems to be that they are campaigning for him. That this is an entire part. Of course, there is the Colombo Twitterati which says Gota's man was there, Gota's man was there, this was behind, Gota was behind all this. This is silly. I mean, I don't think Ranil Wickremesinghe, the same argument can be made for Ranil Wickremesinghe. I don't think he is behind these attacks. We should not be that silly. But who is the United National Party going to field at this point? I have said this to Faraz in one of our previous interviews, that if Mr. Wickremesinghe thinks he can win, he will contest. If he thinks he cannot, he will put someone else. I think he is in the someone else mode of thinking right now. Who that someone else is, we have to wait and see.
Who will the UNP field as their presidential candidate if the presidential elections are held? According to Mr. Senaviratne, if Prime Minister Wickremesinghe thinks he can win, he will contest. If he thinks he can't, he will field someone else. Interesting words there, Mr. Senaviratne. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this evening's program. Thank you very much for being here with us on short notice, and we kept you waiting for a long time as well. Thank you very much, Malinda. Again, we will be joining you tomorrow as well with an interesting guest like Mr. Senaviratne to keep you updated about the interesting facts in our political arena so that you are aware. Thank you very much for watching. I've been Chaturang Hapwara.